Hi, thanks for tuning in. In this video we're going to install a clutch kit in a Polaris Sportsman ATV. We've got a 2006 800 Sportsman here on the rack. First step is just gaining access to the clutches. You can see I've taken the footwell off it already. That's a real simple process. There's 4 bolts that go down through the footrest, and there's 4 plastic darts that you pop out like with a screwdriver. Pretty simple. Once you get those out, you got to wrestle with it a little bit. Lift up on your fenders and kind of push the footwell down underneath it, and then the whole thing will pop out. A tip when you're removing the 4 plastic darts, there's a dart up here. Take your seat off and pop this small side panel off. You've probably had that off your machine before. And take out this first dart, because you're going to need a little extra flex in the rear fender to get the clutch cover off and back on. And just removing this one dart here will help a lot. Once you've gained access to the clutch cover, there's a rubber boot at the top that connects the clutch cover to the clutch vent tube. That boot is held on by a couple of hose clamps, so just loosen one of those up. And then there's 8 bolts around the clutch cover that you need to remove. They're a 3/8 head black bolt. Remove those and you're ready to take the cover off. Now I've already done that, so I'm going to pop the cover off here. And you just a little bit of patience and a little bit of muscle moving the pushing up on the fenders, and it'll pop right out of here. So now we've got the clutches exposed. If you're not familiar, the front clutch is the drive clutch or the primary clutch. The one in the rear is called either the secondary or driven clutch. And obviously they're connected with your drive belt. Next step is I'm going to be removing the clutches from the machine, and that requires the use of a clutch puller to get the primary off. The secondary will come right off once you remove the bolt. And then we'll take them over onto the bench and we'll go through the process of installing the components of the clutch kit. Okay, I repositioned the camera so you can see the process of taking the clutches off the machine. First step, we need to remove the drive or primary clutch retaining bolt here. It's a 5/8 head bolt. You can certainly use just a 1/2 drive socket. You may need to have somebody hold the clutch while you loosen it, or I would just put a metal bar or a large screwdriver, go through the clutch real carefully and have them hold it like that, and that'll allow you to loosen that. Here in the shop we use an impact to remove the bolt and to use the clutch puller to get it off the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. Okay, now the clutch it's on a tapered shaft on the crankshaft, so it's not going to come off. It requires a puller. For this particular machine, the puller, our part number is a PCP1. It fits a lot of the Polaris machines. And that threads right into the clutch. It threads in quite a ways. The end of it is going to butt up against the stub shaft on the crankshaft. So as you tighten it, then it's going to pop the clutch off the crankshaft. Once we get it threaded in, again I'm going to use the impact and we'll tighten it up a little bit, and the clutch is going to pop free. There it went. Remove the puller. Now you can remove the primary clutch. Just pull it forward, kind of pop it out of the belt, and we've got our clutch. I'm going to set this on the workbench over here. Okay, the belt, just pull the belt off. Make note of how it was installed. A lot of people call and ask about what direction they run their belt, how do they know what direction it is. Most manufacturers will either put an arrow on the belt, or they'll tell you make sure it's installed so you can read the numbers or the writing on the belt. The key to this is just that the belt needs to always run in the same direction as when it was installed new. So as long as if you get a new belt, make sure you install it so you can read it or the arrow is correct. And whenever you take it off and put it back on, just make sure it goes on the same way every time. We'll set the belt aside. Now there's a 1/2 inch head bolt holding the driven clutch on. I'm going to loosen that. That's all it is right there. There's not a lot, there's no force required holding it onto the jack shaft. It's just, it's a splined shaft that it's on, so it just needs to stay on. Got to lift the fender here a little bit and pull this clutch off. Now what you want to be careful of on your secondary, on the Polaris, is there's 2 shims on most machines behind the clutch on that shaft. There's 2 on this one. We occasionally see 1. It's kind of a fine-tuning device there. Generally, 90% of the time, you don't have to be concerned with these. Just make sure they stay on the machine so you don't lose them. Well, we've got our secondary clutch off. I'm going to set this on the bench. Okay, we're at the bench. We're going to work on the primary or drive clutch first. First thing to note on the Polaris primary clutch is the spider, which is inside here. There's the cover, the spider, and then the movable sheave. All have markings on them so that they can be reassembled in the correct orientation. These clutches are balanced when they're manufactured, and they need to go back together the same way. Now for the clutch kit purposes, we're only taking the cover off. We're not going to remove the spider. So on the cover on the Polaris, there's always going to be some stampings right here with a manufacture date and some other numbers engraved or stamped in there. That's your marking point. And if you look underneath it at the spider, you won't be able to see this on the camera, but there's an X on the spider. And once we take it apart, below the spider on the movable sheave, there's an X also. So we just need to make sure they're lined up. Some people just take a black marker and they put an X here and they put an X down here so they easily see it and don't mistakenly put it back together incorrectly. In fact, we will go ahead and do that. So while I'm narrating on the camera also, I don't make a mistake. So I've got my X's there. 3/8 head bolts, 6 of them holding the cover down. Again, you know, for the purpose of saving some time, I'm going to use an impact. Generally, as a rule of thumb, it's okay to use impacts for removing and taking apart, but I really don't recommend using them when you're putting this stuff back together. It's just way too easy to strip out one of these bolts, or when we reinstall the clutch on the machine, it needs to be torqued on correctly with the torque wrench. When you get down to the last couple bolts, you need to kind of press down on it, otherwise the spring pressure is going to try and cock this cover up. There we go. So there's our cover. Leave the bolts right in it. Our primary spring. And now we have access to the flyweights in here. Hopefully I've got that turned right so you can see it. 3 weights. What you need to remove those is, again, a 3/8 socket and a 1/8 Allen wrench. There's the clutch pin has got an Allen wrench head on it, and they've got kind of a locking nut on the other side. Take the nut off and pull the pin out. You kind of grab the weight like this, pull the pin out. So here's our clutch weight and our clutch pin. There's 3 of them. Your kit will come with different clutch weights that you're going to install. This machine already has a clutch kit in it, so I'm just going to be reinstalling this one. So you go around and replace the 3 weights. Get this snugged up. No need to torque it. there's a shoulder on that clutch pin that the nut butts up against, so it's a dead tight when you reach that. At that point, it's probably a good idea to clean your clutch. This one's got some belt dust on it. We've got quite a few miles on this since it's been apart. But you know, clean it up. What I do recommend is taking a Scotch Brite pad like this, or even some emery cloth, and go over your clutch sheaves. Work straight in and out like this, not sideways. Go in and out and get them all shined up and cleaned real nice. That certainly always helps with the belt adhesion to the clutch sheaves. Make sure they're clean. After you've done that, be sure to take a paper towel and some parts cleaner. Make sure it's like a contact cleaner or a brake cleaner that doesn't leave any residue, and wipe them down and get all the dust off. Reinstalling, spring back in, make sure we're lined up our marks or the X that's stamped into the spider and the numbers, and bring it up. Now on this particular model, there isn't, I'm able to do this by hand with the primary spring. Now some of them, different models, may have a real heavy-duty primary spring, which requires, you're going to need a buddy here to kind of hold this down and clamp it together so you can get these bolts started, because the spring might be taller or have a lot more tension to it. So I've got those on. I'm going to, of course, like I said, I'm going to tighten them by hand, so there's no chance of over-tightening. I've seen quite a few of these clutch cover bolts stripped out. So I snug them up. And I'm going to set it aside for now, and I'll tighten those later. Let's move on to the driven or secondary clutch. Okay, this particular model, there's several types of different secondary or driven clutches out there. This is a team manufactured clutch, and it's got a removable helix in it. Helix, or some people call it a cam. To remove that, you got 4 Torx head screws that looks like they are a number 25 Torx. Use a little socket. Get those loosened up. Inside here, once we pull these 4 bolts out, we're going to remove the helix, and then inside will be the driven or secondary spring that we'll replace. Now for this spring, you really do need a compression tool. It's a very heavy spring. I've heard some garage stories on ways that people have found to change it without a compression tool, but besides being dangerous, I'd say that it's got to take a lot of time and probably end up with some bloody knuckles. Once we get the 4 bolts out, this should pop right out. There it comes. Now the helix has 2 ramp areas. These ramp areas fit over the rollers in the clutch. And when you reinstall it, you need to make sure that you align them correctly and install the cam or the helix. Now in some kits you'll receive a different helix or cam to install. Not all of them do. When we go through the testing on each and every machine, we try a lot of different custom angle helixes, and we don't always find improvement with them. Some machines we do notice some performance improvement, and some we don't. So your kit may or may not include that. Okay, now that that's out, here we've got the driven or secondary spring is down under this assembly, this cover assembly. There's a very large snap ring on it. You can see I've got the tool. I'm going to show you this. It clamps into a vise, a bench vise. So here's what it looks like. And clamp it into your bench vise. You slide your clutch right over the top. So turn your clutch so you've got your the snap ring facing you. And then this is the other part of the tool. It's this top yoke that goes over it. There's a washer and a nut. Run that nut down. now once it's run down there, all you have to do is give it about a half a turn here, and it takes the spring pressure off the snap ring in here. You have a snap ring tool. We'll open that snap ring up and pull it all the way to the top. You can start loosening this. Now you're going to relieve the tension off that driven spring, and the yoke, the housing over the top of the spring is going to come up out of the clutch. And I'll show you what this looks like. We've got our snap ring. You've got this yoke that the spring seats in here, and our spring that came out. That's all there is in the driven clutch. I'll show you what's in there. So that's all there is to it. Now there's a little trick to reassembling this. If you look closely, it's splined all the way around, all these teeth, but at one point there's a double wide tooth. That's always on an end with one of the rollers. That obviously needs to align with a double wide tooth down here on the clutch shaft. So you find that location. I've got it right here. So typically what I do then is make a mark up on the top of this shaft, so I can tell where it's at. Install your spring. Make sure you find the side on this where the double tooth is, and bring it down right over that mark. Don't forget your snap ring. I've compressed a lot of springs in here only to realize I forgot the snap ring and I had to take it apart again. Reinstall the other part of the compression tool. And now as you slowly tighten this nut down, you're going to keep your hand right on this piece here, because you can move it back and forth a little bit. And as the splined part on the shaft reaches this top housing, they're either going to slide together, or they're going to kind of get stuck, and you'll feel your wrench tighten up. You need to back off a little bit and just move it, just a half a tooth either direction until you mate those two double wide teeth together. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating. You feel like it takes a dozen tries, and then the next time you do it, you hit it dead on the first try, and I think I hit it right on there. Once you get down far enough, you need to get the snap ring started. I just started it onto the shaft. I'm going to continue compressing that, and I did hit those teeth dead on. I always brag about the fact that I can usually hit it dead on, so now I've got proof on camera so the other guys in the shop will believe me. Okay, make sure the snap ring is brought all the way down and seats in the groove down there, and we're done with this process. As soon as I give this a turn back, it's loose already because the snap ring is holding it in. And that's all there is to installing the spring in the secondary. Okay, we're going to reinstall the helix, or install the new helix that came with your kit. Again, just make sure now that there's no orientation on here as correct or incorrect. It's just a matter of making sure that the rollers are aligned in the roller tracks here. So we slide that down. Now, what happens because you've had this housing out of the clutch? This isn't always installed correctly to allow you to line these holes up with the bolt holes in the clutch housing. So as I drop it down, you can see I need these holes to twist way over here. Now sometimes you can just do it by hand. It might be under a little pressure, And that's perfectly fine, because as soon as you start driving the vehicle, this will all self-adjust and be where it needs to be. Sometimes you're off far enough where you can't turn this and get the holes to line up. Don't worry, it's just a matter of take the cover off and with your hand turn this in here. And it's just fighting the spring a little bit, but you can get that turned to a better angle. So then as you drop this down, our holes align real easily. There's a little, I would say that's about a 1/16 of an inch, where it presses into the clutch. Sometimes you can pop it in by hand, like that. Other times you can't quite do that. Use a soft mallet, a rubber mallet, tap around it until it snaps down. We've got our 4 retaining bolts here. If you are reassembling your machine and you have no plans on ever taking it apart again, I would recommend putting some Loctite on these. Just some of the medium strength blue is fine. We take our machines apart enough that I'm not going to do it on this one. Just like on the primary clutch cover bolts, be real careful with these. You can strip out this aluminum clutch housing pretty easily. Snug them up. And we're done with that. So we've changed out the spring and the helix, and we've changed out the weights and the spring on our primary. We're ready to put the clutches back on the machine. Okay, we're ready to reinstall the clutches on the machine. Got all the components installed in the 2 clutches, and we're going to start out, actually we're going to start with the secondary clutch. Make sure, like I noted earlier, make sure these 2 shims stayed on the jack shaft. And it'll lift up on the fender. And remember, it's going on a spline shaft, so you might have to try it a few times, turn it back and forth until the splines line up. It'll slide all the way on. Install this retaining bolt. Like I said before, as a rule of thumb, removing things with air tools or impact tools, that's great. Reassembling them, no. Make sure you do it by hand so you don't over tighten anything. There, that one's good. Drive clutch. First step, make sure the inside of the clutch, where the stub shaft goes, is clean, and wipe the stub shaft off too. You need a nice, clean, dry mating surface between those two, because once it's torqued on, you don't want any slip there. On the retaining bolt, none of this should have come apart when you removed it, but just in case, there is a black plastic spacer here, a large washer and a little locking washer, and that's the order that they go together. Get that screwed in by hand, and then we use, like I said before, like a pry bar in there. We're going to torque this retaining bolt to 45 to 47 foot-pounds. All set for that. Good there. Okay, our clutches are on, they're mounted. All we need to do is install the belt. Now, the key to installing the belt correctly, so that you don't damage the belt, is a lot of people will start it over the driven clutch, and they'll just muscle it around. And I'm sure everybody's done it or seen it before. It gets tighter and tighter, and then you've really got to muscle it through there. The reason you don't want to do that is that last portion, as it comes over the edge of the clutch, it's going to cut some of the inner cogs and damage the belt. So we, on the Polaris clutch, Now the newer ones actually come with a tool in the tool kit, and I believe they call it a belt removal tool. It's got a kind of a hook shape on one end with a handle, and it allows you to get in here and pry against this the roller housing in the driven clutch, and it'll open the sheaves up so you can drop the belt down in there and you'll have more slack. Again, I think that's on the newer ones. On any with this style of clutch, you can do the same thing with a couple of screwdrivers. I'm going to grab a second one here. You start on one side. The two surfaces you need to get in between are actually tight against each other. So just use a big screwdriver and pry a little bit. You'll feel it move. You get the other screwdriver in the other side in that opening. Now we can get our big screwdriver in the opening. I've got my hand on top of the belt at the top of the clutch, and as I'm prying and the clutch sheaves are spreading, I'm pressing the belt down in there. And as you work the two together, then you can get the screwdriver in further. There we go. Now I can open it up real wide, and I've got a lot of slack to work the belt around. See how easily that went on. Make sure the machine's in neutral so you can spin the clutch. You don't want to put it together, put the clutch cover back on like this, because the belt is way down in the secondary. Spin that and let the clutch back shift. Our belt tightened up. The belt is riding out as far as it can on the secondary or driven clutch. So we are fully back shifted. We're ready to put the cover on. We're ready to go ride it. Make sure after you've got the cover on, make sure this the vent tube with the rubber boot up here is sealed good, and take it a little easy at first. Everybody makes mistakes. You may have forgotten to tighten something. Somebody may have interrupted you in the middle of it, and you forgot to go back and do something. So we of course caution you not to jump on it and hit it full throttle. Take it out for a nice easy ride. Make sure it sounds correct. Your engagement should be up anywhere from 200 to 500 RPM over stock, and you should be all set to go.
For more information on the products featured here, please head to our website, DennisKirk.com.